you sit in the audience of a massive, like, big budget Broadway production, right?
Yeah.
A musical with the flying sets, rapid fire costume changes, hundreds of complex lighting cues. You never actually think about the stage manager.
Oh, never.
Yeah, you don't picture them sitting in some dark booth with a heavy binder, aggressively calling out every single cue to the crew. You just sit back and experience the magic.
And I mean, that is entirely by design. If the crew does their job right, the logistics are completely invisible to the audience.
Correct.
You are just swept up in the emotion of the performance. The mechanics, they only reveal themselves when something actually goes wrong.
Exactly. The second one, single person misses a cue like a spotlight is 3 seconds late, or a prop isn't preset on stage, the entire illusion just shatters.
Yeah, it breaks the spell.
Suddenly all you can see are those mechanics. And today's deep dive is all about keeping that magic intact. Welcome in.
Glad to be here.
So whether you are actively planning a massive event yourself, helping a friend navigate their big day, or, you're just endlessly fascinated by the hidden machinery behind large-scale operations, this is a goldmine for you. We are pulling our material today straight from the business and logistics section of the Weddizer website.
Weddizer is just a fantastic resource for this. For those who aren't familiar, it's a platform that provides incredibly specialized planning guidance through these highly detailed niche articles.
Yeah, they really get into the weeds.
They do. They really excel at taking the emotion out of event planning and injecting a solid dose of operational strategy.
And specifically, we're looking at their comprehensive guide on finalizing vendor contracts. Now, I know the word contract usually makes people's eyes glaze over.
Oh, for sure.
Because planning a wedding or a major milestone is supposed to be highly emotional. It's about vision and aesthetics and celebration. But the logistics are pure business.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. Treating these vendor agreements with a strict, almost ruthless business mindset is the absolute best way to prevent last-minute stress, unexpected costs, and a total breakdown in communication.
Which nobody wants.
Exactly. Our mission today is to show you exactly how to build that safety net.
Think of the contract as, like, the armor that protects the emotion of the day. But before you can negotiate that armor, you have to fundamentally understand how it's forged.
Right.
The Weddizer article makes a really foundational point here. Contracts are legally binding documents that protect both the buyer and the service provider.
It's a two-way street.
Exactly. It's not a weapon for the vendor to use against you or some sort of trap designed to steal your deposit.
It's a mutual set of boundaries. And the guide breaks down 5 critical elements you have to hunt for in any vendor agreement. Let's start with the first one, the detailed scope of services.
And the emphasis there is heavily on the word detailed.
Yeah, heavily. We're talking exact hours, specific deliverables, the exact number of edited photos, precise menu items down to the garnishes. The source material is just adamant that vague language is your biggest enemy.
It's the enemy because vague language creates a vacuum. And in a high-stress environment, people fill that vacuum with their own assumptions.
Which is terrifying.
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking about this when reviewing the source material. Accepting a vague scope of services in a contract is basically like walking into a high-end restaurant, handing the waiter a $100 bill, and just saying, bring me some food.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy.
Right, you would never do that. You want the menu, you want to know if you're getting a steak or a salad, and you want to know the portion size. So why on earth would you hand a wedding caterer or a photographer $5,000 and sign a contract that simply says wedding day coverage?
Well, the short answer is you shouldn't. But people do it because they assume coverage means the exact same thing to the vendor as it does to them.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
To a photographer, coverage might legally mean a standard 6-hour block. But to you, the client, coverage implies they are there from the moment you wake up for hair and makeup until you leave the reception in a getaway car.
That is a massive difference.
It is. That discrepancy is an absolute disaster waiting to happen on the day of the event.
But let me push back on this for a second. If I am hiring a top-tier, highly experienced professional, shouldn't I just, trust their process? Doesn't demanding an itemized list of every single shot they take or every flower they place cross the line into micromanaging?
It's a fair concern, for sure, but defining the scope isn't about telling the professional how to do their job. It's about defining the boundaries of the job.
Okay.
You aren't telling the photographer what lens to use. You are legally establishing that they will be on the premises from 1:00 p.m. to 9:00 p.m., and that you will receive a minimum of 400 edited images by a specific date. You are just removing assumptions.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So detailed scopes protect the vision of the day. But let's transition to protecting the wallet, because the vision doesn't matter at all if the cash flow causes a panic attack.
Very true.
The second element Weddizer highlights is payment terms and schedules. And this goes way beyond just looking at the final price tag.
Oh, much further. The payment schedule dictates the lifeblood of the vendor's business and your personal cash flow. The guide emphasizes looking for the deposit amount, the subsequent payment deadlines, the accepted methods of payment, and, this is crucial, the mechanics of late penalties.
And this ties directly into the third element, which is cancellation and refund policies. Because, well, life is completely unpredictable.
It really is.
The guide stresses looking for refund eligibility, hard cancellation deadlines, and rescheduling options. But I want to dig into the mechanics of this because I think people get really confused by the terminology here.
Yeah.
A lot of vendor contracts use the word non-refundable retainer instead of deposit. Legally, why is that distinction so important?
Yeah, what's fascinating here is the underlying legal concept of liquidated damages. So if you give a baker a deposit for a cake, a deposit is traditionally viewed as an advance payment for goods.
Right.
If you cancel the order before the cake is baked, you could legally argue that you should get that money back because they haven't actually given you the goods yet.
But vendors obviously don't want to do that because they've probably turned away other clients for your date.
Precisely. That is the opportunity cost. So vendors use a non-refundable retainer. A retainer is legally a fee paid to secure their availability for that specific date.
I see.
Yeah, they are earning that money the moment you sign the contract by officially turning away any other business for that Saturday. If you cancel, they keep the retainer as liquidated damages to cover the income they lost by holding your spot. Understanding that mechanism completely changes how you view that upfront payment.
It's not them being greedy, it's them protecting their business from your hypothetical cancellation. That completely reframes it.
Exactly.
And speaking of hypothetical disasters, what about acts of God? Like if a venue burns down or a hurricane hits, you don't want to be locked into a catering contract for a party that legally cannot happen.
Which is why you must hunt for the force majeure clause.
Right.
It's a French term meaning superior force.
Right.
It legally frees both parties from liability or obligation when some extraordinary event or circumstance beyond their control prevents one or both parties from fulfilling their obligations.
That's huge.
The Weddizer logistics section makes it very clear. You need to know exactly what qualifies as a force majeure event in your specific contract and what the financial untangling looks like if it actually happens.
Okay, so we've covered the money and the worst-case cancellation scenarios. Let's talk about the actual day. The fourth element is the delivery timeline. This includes setup and teardown schedules, how long the catering service actually lasts, and when physical goods will arrive.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to remember the Broadway analogy we started with. A large-scale event is a live production. It is an intricately interconnected web of independent contractors who all rely on each other to succeed.
Wait, I see where this is going. Because if one person is late, it's not just their problem. It's a massive domino effect.
Exactly.
Let's say my floral contract doesn't specify a strict setup time. It just has a general delivery date for the day of the wedding. So the florist decides to arrive at 3:00 p.m. instead of 1:00 p.m.
Follow that thread. What happens next?
Well, because the flowers aren't set up on the tables, my photographer can't take the detailed shots of the empty reception room. And because the photographer is waiting around for the florist to finish, the family portraits get pushed back.
Yep.
Now the portraits are running incredibly late, bleeding right into the cocktail hour. The timeline shifts by 45 minutes, and because of that delay, the caterer's expensive, perfectly timed hot appetizers are now sitting under heat lamps in the kitchen, drying out and getting ruined.
And suddenly, you are furious with the caterer for serving dry food, and you're annoyed at the photographer for rushing the portraits, when the actual root cause of the entire disaster was a vague delivery timeline in the florist's contract.
Wow. All because there wasn't a 1:00 p.m. hard deadline written into the agreement. That is terrifying.
It is the reality of live production logistics. This is why the Weddizer guide suggests looking for cure periods or grace periods.
Okay, what does that mean exactly?
Basically, if a vendor is 30 minutes late, is there a financial penalty? What are the exact expectations? You need those minute-by-minute deadlines locked in writing.
And then there's the final of the 5 elements, liability and insurance, which basically asks, who is responsible when things physically go wrong? Does the vendor carry their own insurance?
This is incredibly crucial for large-scale services and venues. We are talking about the concept of indemnification.
Break that down for us, because that's a heavy legal term that I guarantee most people just gloss right over.
Oh, they absolutely do. Indemnification basically means compensating someone for harm or loss. In a contract, an indemnification clause dictates who pays the bill if someone gets hurt or property gets damaged.
So if my very clumsy Uncle Bob trips over the DJ speaker wire, pulls the whole lighting rig down, and smashes $10,000 worth of audio equipment,
Yeah, that's bad.
I do not want to be the one personally on the hook for buying the DJ News setup.
You certainly don't. The contract needs to clearly define where your liability ends and theirs begins. Furthermore, this is why venues will often require outside vendors to provide a certificate of insurance, or a COI.
Right.
The venue wants legal proof that if the caterer accidentally starts a fire in the kitchen, the caterer's insurance will cover the building damage, not the venue's insurance, and certainly not your personal bank account.
Okay, so we have the blueprint. We know the 5 structural elements to hunt for in the business section: the scope, the payment terms, the cancellations, the delivery timelines, and the liability clauses. We know how to read the contract and understand the mechanics of it. But now we move from just reading the document to actively shaping it. We are talking about the art of negotiation.
And this is where treating your event like a business really pays dividends.
Because the Weddizer logistics articles point out something that a lot of people just don't realize when they are caught up in the emotional whirlwind of planning vendor. Pricing is often flexible.
Very flexible.
The guide suggests looking into custom packages, off-season rates, and bundling services. But here's where it gets really interesting. The guide strongly advises against asking for a straight discount. Instead, they suggest asking for additional services.
Yes, focusing on an added value rather than a reduced price.
Right. So instead of fighting a tense battle to get $200 knocked off the final photography bill, you ask the photographer if they would be willing to throw in an extra hour of coverage at the end of the night.
Exactly.
Or you ask the caterer if they could include an extra late-night snack item for the same total price. When I read this, it felt like a total secret hack. It transforms the negotiation from an adversarial standoff over a discount into this really friendly, collaborative conversation about upgrades.
What's fascinating here is the underlying economics of how these small businesses operate. For a vendor, dropping their baseline price is a direct hit to their hard revenue. It hurts their profit margin, and it devalues their core service.
Yeah, nobody wants to lower their rate.
But throwing in a complimentary decor upgrade or adding an extra side dish to the buffet?
The cost to them is tiny.
Exactly. We are talking about marginal cost, the actual wholesale cost of a caterer throwing some extra slider buns and ground beef into their massive bulk food order, or a florist pulling a few extra glass vases out of their storage unit is incredibly low.
Right.
The marginal cost to the vendor might be $30.
But the perceived value to me, the client, is massive. I feel like I just got a $300 late-night food station for free.
It is the definition of a win-win scenario. The vendor gets to keep their top-line revenue high, which protects their business model, and you get hundreds of dollars in added value, which makes you feel incredibly well cared for as a client. It builds a very positive, collaborative working relationship right from the starting line.
I absolutely love that. But let me play devil's advocate for a moment. If I'm getting married in June, right in the absolute peak of wedding season, and a vendor has 5 other couples begging for my date, do they actually care to negotiate at all? Won't they just say no to my request for an upgrade and move on to the next person?
It's a valid question. In peak season, leverage definitely shifts. A vendor is highly unlikely to lower their price when demand is that high.
Right, why would they?
However, that is exactly why the upgrades instead of discounts tactic is so effective. Even in peak season, vendors want to close the deal quickly. If tossing in a $50 set of string lights gets you to sign a $10,000 contract today, rather than them having to spend another week doing consultations with other couples, they will almost always take the deal.
Oh, that makes sense.
It saves them time, which is their most valuable asset in peak season.
That makes total sense. Time is money. Now, the guide also mentions negotiating other financial mechanics, specifically regarding the back-end costs, like the hidden fees. The Weddizer article explicitly warns readers to clarify overtime charges and billing increments.
Because a wedding rarely runs perfectly to the minute. You need to know the overtime rates, but more importantly, you need to understand the grace periods and the billing increments.
Right, because if the father of the bride's speech runs 15 minutes long and the photographer has to stay a few minutes past their contracted end time to capture the cake cutting,